Hello and welcome to my Yu-Gi-Oh channel. So you might have seen the news recently that with Lightning Overdrive, they've really gone in deep with recovering certain archetypes. You've got Bujin support, new Trap Trick support. Well, it seems they're going even further into it, and they're actually giving us a brand new Sky Scourge monster. But before you get to see that card and see my opinions on it, we're going to cover the initial Sky Scourge monsters. That's right, folks. The first one is Sky Scourge Enrise. It's a light attribute fairy type, level 8, with 2,400 attack and 1,500 defense. This card cannot be normal summoned or set. This card cannot be special summoned, except by removing from play 3 light attribute fairy type monsters and 1 dark fiend monster in your graveyard. Once per turn, you can remove from play 1 face-up monster on the field. If you activate this effect, this card cannot attack during this turn. So this reminds me a lot of the Black Luster Soldier Envoy of the beginning, and something like Chaos Emperor, not Chaos Emperor Dragon, Chaos Sorcerer, because they each require to be summoned from banishing light and dark. This is a lot more specific, but each of them allow you to banish a face-up monster, but in exchange they can't attack that turn. That's not necessarily a bad thing if your opponent has spell or trap support or ways of stopping your monster from attacking. This is always a good effect to have. It removes the threat and it prevents your opponent from setting up, which is all good things. It's always the best thing to do to stop your opponent from getting any further resources. Potentially, it does have the problem that if your opponent is playing defensively and if their monsters are set, then this effect won't work. I would say this card is a lot weaker than either of the previous 2 monsters that I just mentioned, because this is very specific. It needs 3 light fairy type monsters and 1 dark fiend monster, whereas the other monsters, Chaos Sorcerer needs a light and a dark. This needs very, very specific attribute and light support run within the decks in order to rely on it at all. And the thing is, whilst those require 1 of each, this card needs 4 cards to bring it out. So you do need to be running things such as, I hate to say it, but equivalent to things like Painful Choice to get this type of effect. I think it's quite useful what it can do, and it's a really decent card. It's just a bit of a shame that it's just quite weak. And if its stat lineup was a little bit stronger, or maybe it had been 2 light fairy types and 2 dark fiends, I wouldn't have had as much issue as I do with this card. Anyway, the next one we've got is Sky Scourge Norlerus. It's a dark fiend type, level 8 with 2,400 attack and 1,500 defense. This card cannot be normal summoned or set. This card cannot be special summoned except by removing from play 1 light fairy type monster and 3 dark fiend type monsters in your graveyard. You can pay 1,000 life points to send all cards on the field and in both players' hands to the graveyard. Then you can draw 1 card. Okay, so this is meant to be a little bit like Chaos Emperor Dragon in a slightly weakened form. It's got more restrictions to it. For starters, it needs you to get rid of a specific light fairy type and 3 dark fiend types, versus Chaos Emperor, which requires a light monster and a dark monster. So you're getting rid of 2 more monsters. It's similar to how Enrise needs 3 light fairies. It's supposed to be like the flip of that. It's a bit of a nightmare to get out. And it's got a similar effect to something like, I think, Demise King of Armageddon, but it does have a less of a life point cost. That's 2,000 life points versus this is 1,000 life points. Unlike Chaos Emperor, which does burn damage to your opponent as well, 300 times the number of cards that are destroyed. This doesn't have that effect, but it does let you draw a card, so you have a little bit more consistency. If you were to have played Sangan on the field as well, then you've got your search from that as well, which helps to support your deck and can put you in a position where you are are actually winning. The problem with this card is, firstly, the consistency of bringing it out. You do need a lot of graveyard setup. There are cards that support it, and there are quite a few now, but it's still a bit of a nuisance to bring out. The other thing is, of course, this card can be shut down by things like Breakthrough Skill, Effect Veiler, various forms of negation, infinite impermanence, to name a few. And of course, you know, you've gone through all that effort to bring this card out, and it's shut down, and it can be easily gotten rid of, really. That's the biggest concern to it. And the final of the originals is Sky Scourge Imbecile. It's an Earth attribute fairy type level 6 monster with 2,200 attack and 1,600 defense. This card cannot be special summoned. If you tribute summon this card by tributing one of the following monsters, this card gets the appropriate effects. So a light fairy type monster, you can negate the effects of all spell cards, or a dark fiend type monster, you negate the effects of all trap cards. Essentially, you're being given a choice between either having spell canceller's effect or Jinzo's effects. This basically steals both effects. If you've got two of them on the field and you've managed to get both effects off, you've shut your opponent from doing a lot of things. They can only use monster effects. If you can have this out and you've got Plasma, then your opponent is really in a position where they can't do much outside of maybe kaijuing you. This is quite deadly as a combination. Well, it used to be. But with as many outs as you have now, often it's a case of tribute summoning a monster is too slow. And of course, it cannot be special summoned to begin with. It doesn't get the effect off with that either way. So it is a little bit concerning. I hope in the future that they do introduce more Sky Scourges. And I'm actually going to start reviewing the last one now as well. And this is the final Sky Scourge, which has been introduced within Lightning Overdrive. It's called Sky Scourge SCOURGES. It's a level 6 Earth attribute fiend type effect monster with 2,200 attack and 1,600 defense. It cannot be special summoned. If this card is tribute summoned, you can apply these effects based on the type and attribute of the monsters tributed for this tribute summon. Light Fairy, add 1 Light Fairy or Dark Fiend monster from your deck to your hand. Or Dark Fiend, you can send 1 Light Fairy monster and 1 Dark Fiend monster from your deck to your hand. So this isn't really effective in the point of view that it's meant to set up for the other Sky Scourge monsters, really. The first effect for the Light Fairy means you're able to search into one of your other versions. So if you've got, since both attributes and both typings actually are very common within Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's quite easy to find something useful from that. So you've got Archlord Christia, you've got various Dark Fiends, even things like even some of the evil heroes have meet this condition as well. Alternatively, actually, I prefer the Dark Fiend effect, where you just send the requirements to the graveyard. That means you can always just go in against your opponent. It's preferable in terms of effects. I don't think these cards are going to be, this is going to be useful, and until we get something better, it's just not that valuable. Yes, it can be used in the Chaos format, and it's comparable in some extent to something like Dark Grepher. I just think it's a little bit slower, and it being a tribute monster makes it that much worse. So what do you guys think of this card? Make sure to leave those comments down below, and keep watching the live stream. Just keep yourself entertained. I know it's a difficult time, and trying to make things as simple and as nice as possible, and trying to give you a really nice positive experience.